I'm Shira Schoenberg. Welcome to the Codcast. This year, due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Massachusetts Legislature allowed voters to mail in their ballot for any reason, and also expanded in-person early voting. With the excitement of the presidential race and these new policies that make it easier to vote, Massachusetts appears to be on track to have record turnout in Tuesday's general election, with huge numbers of people voting before Election Day. With me today are Pam Wilmot, Vice President of State Operations and Massachusetts Executive Director for the Good Government Group Common Cause, and State Senator Barry Finegold, an Andover Democrat who chairs the legislature's Joint Committee on Election Laws. Thanks for joining me. Pam, should no excuse mail-in voting be here to stay?
Absolutely. I mean, this is an issue that most states have dealt with, not all of them, and an issue that has been before the Massachusetts legislature before. It was actually passed in a joint session in, I believe, 2006, and then it didn't make it to the second part of the legislative session. We've kind of done this workaround with early voting by mail. But the simplest thing is just to change the constitutional language just to make it 100% clear and easy. But regardless of the mechanism, it's clear this worked. We had record turnout in the primary, 1.7 million people voting, a 30-year high in terms of percentage. And, that was about more than almost 4.5 times the number of people that voted in the primary in 2016. Typically, a gubernatorial primary is more participatory than a state primary before a federal general election. Presidential election. So this process works, and we should absolutely make it permanent.
Senator Finegold, so far the legislature has only allowed this no excuse mail-in voting this year. Governor Baker actually recently voiced support for continuing it. Do you think the legislature would be interested in expanding mail-in voting for other elections? And what are the considerations behind that?
I definitely think there is a lot of support to extend it. However, we do have to there are some challenges moving forward. One is to make sure that we have as streamlined as a process for the clerks, which I think they've done a Herculean job. The other thing that is of concern is how little lower socioeconomic communities participated in. So the communities like Lexington, Belmont, Andover, Newton, through the roof of participation. Our lower socioeconomic communities like Lawrence, Brockton, Lowell, Fall River did not participate as much. And why does that matter? Well, I can tell you in my district, for the first time ever, there were more votes cast in the town of Andover in a primary than the city of Lawrence. And Lawrence has twice as many people as the town of Andover. That's never happened before. Now, once again, it's a great thing for people in the higher socioeconomic communities to participate the way they have, which is great, but we got to do some work to make sure that people understand vote by mail. Now, at the end of the day, what it might be is that we didn't do enough education, and we don't want to, not move forward with vote by mail in the future just because of this. But I do think if we do move forward with vote by mail, we definitely need to do a better job, and I mean all of us, of educating lower socioeconomic communities, and especially communities of color, about that voting by mail is safe, and this is something to strongly consider.
So Pam, how do you get those minority communities to turn out to vote, and why is there this disparity?
Well, there's some structural barriers that don't really even relate to voter education. They relate to the mail. It is much harder when you're in a multi-family building to get your mail reliably and to have it not go, somewhere else. And we see this across the country, and that's why we have to preserve in-person voting options. It's funny that we've had this big brouhaha about vote by mail with the president saying it's not safe because, one, he has voted by mail in every election, and two, it tends to be older and whiter people that vote by mail. So we are all for expanding options for voters, and that includes in-person options as well as vote by mail options. It's true that more education does help, but it only gets you so far. And that's why it's a hybrid system, and that's what we have here. And we may end up in a system where, the demographics do look different. And part of it is time, mail, and education.
Senator Finegold, is education enough, or what do you see as more, or what needs to be done to deal with that disparity?
No, I think Pam makes some great points that it is sometimes difficult for people to get their mail. But we do need to make sure that our voter rolls are accurate, that we are sending the applications out to the right people. So I think that it's something that we can also improve to do, is get our voter rolls as clean as possible. And the one thing that we did, which I think was smart, is that we just didn't mail everyone a ballot. We made people take the two-step process to get their ballots. And because of that, I don't think anybody can say there's fraud, because when you do this two-step process, you sign under the pains and penalty of perjury that this is you. And at the same time, we accomplished what we set out to do. Before the largest primary, before September 1st of this year, the largest primary is 1.5 million people. Well, this time around, we had 1.6 million people. So as Pam was saying, it was an overwhelming success. So our system works. It was foolproof, but we do have to find a way to make sure that, as Pam said, that these applications by mail are getting to the people in all communities. And I do think that if we do have some more leaders in the lower socioeconomic community to tell people that it's safe to vote by mail, then I think this is something that you'll see more and more people take advantage of. And just on a sidebar, I mean, this is the same exact thing we're dealing with the whole vaccine, where it seems that people with higher socioeconomic communities are apt to take the vaccine, where lower socioeconomic communities are not. So like in vote by mail, we are doing a big education thrust to try to get people to be comfortable with the vaccine. And hopefully when, next time around, they'll be more comfortable with voting by mail.
Pam, your organization was actually one of the groups that had been advocating to send every voter a ballot. Obviously, that didn't happen. We do have this two-step process. Is Senator Finegold right that this is a better process and this is the way to go if the legislature decides to continue vote by mail in the future?
So a couple of things. We moved very quickly towards vote by mail. Usually this is a very gradual process. Before this year, only 3 to 5% voted by mail, depending on the election. So it's a huge jump to go from 3 to 5% to about 50%, which we won in the primary, and probably that much in the general as well. And we actually didn't have all the things in place to make that a fully successful system. And so this was probably the appropriate step to take, given where we are. As Senator Finegold mentioned, our voter rolls are not as accurate as they should be to really do a full vote by mail system. You've got to get people used to voting by mail. You've got to give them in-person options, and you do have to have accurate voting rolls, which we do not have. The legislature actually passed something to make a big difference in that process in 2018, which was called the Electronic Registration Information Center, ERIC, which is a consortium of states that share their data and with also the federal government to say who's moved into the state, who's moved out of the state, who's died, and then strike the people that are not appropriate from the rolls and add those who actually are eligible to vote through a reach out and proactive system. Right now, this was the right call. I was worried personally about our clerks and their ability to fulfill all these requests. And the way that it was actually implemented took care or reduced some of their work. There's smart barcodes on the applications so they could be scanned rather than hand entered. That was a big step in the right direction. When the applications were mailed out in July, there was an option to apply for all elections. So that could be done once instead of multiple times for multiple elections. That also reduced their workload. So there was always in public policy, there's always trade-offs. And the fear was, particularly if the pandemic was very bad at this point, that there just wouldn't be enough time to fulfill the requests. And what we're seeing is they're actually on top of it. They're doing a great job. They've always done a good job, but we thought this might just be too much. And they've risen to the task and done the work that is required. So I think there's still ultimately work that's going to need to be done in terms of purchasing more equipment, dealing with the Dropbox issue, which we probably should get to at some point today, improving the online portal for ballot requests, which has some problems the way it was implemented. But the application process and the way it was done was very simple. It was very easy to use, and it front-loaded the work so that some of the concerns I had did not play out.
Senator Finegold, you've now both mentioned this burden on clerks. And I know certainly in the primary, there were some issues that clerks had. And then we've also seen in general, just things like, glitches, people getting the wrong ballot in the mail, getting the wrong envelope in the mail, getting the wrong letter. There was some issues after the primary with some ballots not getting counted right after the election. They kind of just got stuck in a vault. What more needs to be done if we continue this kind of early voting in the future in order to make it easier for the clerks and make the process run more smoothly? What will your committee be looking at?
Well, I understand that, and I'll agree with Pam, is that the job that our clerks in our cities and towns are doing right now is Herculean. They have such a big job to do. But the one difference between us and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and you're going to be hearing a lot about this in the next several days, is that we allow our clerks to pre-process the ballots. So we allow them to go through them. We allow them to verify signatures, basically to almost get to the point where the ballots are about ready to be counted. Where in states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, they cannot touch any of this stuff till the election day, which is why we're concerned that we may not know results for weeks. So I think we've given the clerks the tools they wanted. Could we have more drop boxes? Absolutely. But I do think they have the tools they need. I mean, we give them also poll pads, which allows them to check in people a lot easier using basically, iPads. We've done a lot of that type of stuff. So I think there's always room for more technology. But unlike many other states, we allow our clerks to pre-process ballots. And I think because of that, in a state like Massachusetts, we'll know winners on November 3rd.
You've both mentioned drop boxes. This year, we literally had a Boston drop box that was set on fire, and some ballots were lost. And I think that plays into some of these larger concerns about security as we try new methods of voting. We're familiar with this external threat of countries like Russia and China trying to interfere in our elections. There are cybersecurity concerns. The president himself has raised concerns about fraud related to mail-in ballots. Senator Finegold, I'll start with you and then move to Pam. What safeguards has or should the legislature put in place to make sure our elections are protected this year and also moving forward?
Well, I think that incident in Boston is really an anomaly. I think the vast majority of boxes are safe. And I think, unfortunately, there are people that desecrate government property all the time. But I don't think we should be worried that these drop boxes aren't safe. It's as safe as we've had post office boxes. And for the most part, our mail has been very reliable. So I think there will be outliers. We had an issue in the primary where there were some ballots in Franklin, Massachusetts that weren't counted. That stuff is going to happen. But the vast majority of the process has gone well. In my opinion, will go well. So I think people should feel comfortable, and I'm pretty confident that we'll have a pretty smooth day on November 3rd here in Massachusetts.
Pam?
So a couple things, safeguards, the smart codes that are on the ballots are something that's very helpful, because that includes, it's not something that you can read as an individual, but the election official knows that whose that actually was supposed to be. They're pre-filled out. There's signature matching. It is a very secure process. Drop boxes also are secure. I think this was a homeless person. It was an anomalous situation. It was not an intentional trying to shift an election or anything. Many drop boxes, the more expensive ones, are actually pretty fireproof. They have a very small slot that you can't really get things into, and they have low oxygen so that they do not catch on fire, and they even test them with explosives. So there are, and some of them are like cemented into the ground that cannot be removed. But we had to get these things very quickly. So some of them were like book boxes that were retrofitted and don't have all the bells and whistles. I think going forward, we might want to look at that. But I do, not necessarily on the legislative side, but on the administrative side. But I do think that communities should not be removing their drop boxes or shutting down their hours because one homeless guy, who probably didn't even know where he was, put something into that he shouldn't have. So, and we also are only talking about 35 ballots. They essentially have some ideas of, and so that is not, every vote lost is a problem. In terms of those administrative issues that you mentioned, I think we'll get better at this. There will be procedures in place to reduce errors. There have not been very many. They've been a very, very small drop on the bucket. Very few ballots have not been counted. So we haven't had these huge cure problems that they have in some other states. But we see that in in-person voting too. We see poll workers that don't check the inactive voting list and turn people away instead of checking the right list and giving them a challenge ballot. They give them a provisional ballot instead of a challenge ballot. There are errors every election cycle, whether you're talking about in person or otherwise. And that's to be expected. This is a huge undertaking done by professionals from the clerk side, but then a bunch of volunteers essentially who got $100 to work for 16 hours staffing the polls. And our goal is always perfection. It should be perfection, but we're human and things happen. And that's why we, Common Cause, and 100 different organizations runs an election protection program. That's why the Secretary of State and the Attorney General have hotlines for people to call if there are issues, and we resolve them. I've worked with the Secretary of State and with local officials and many problems on election day, and done problem solving on the fly, and it's been successful. This is our democracy. It's what we need to do as citizens, to use our voice and to cast our ballots, and the best system that we can humanly create.
Pam, your organization had a success this year. Actually, automatic voter registration went into effect. Anyone who conducts a transaction at the RMV or with Mass Health who is an eligible voter is now automatically registered to vote. But your organization has also been pushing for other things like allowing same-day voter registration. Given what we've seen, and obviously with the knowledge that this year was not a typical election, are there other voting reforms that your organization will continue to be pushing for here in Massachusetts?
Absolutely. So one, the system that the legislature passed for automatic voter registration is not what was implemented. So We hope to get that fixed to deal with the ERIC situation that I mentioned, to clean up our voter rolls, again, which was passed by the legislature but not implemented. We would like to see same-day voter registration. I think that is something that many states, about half the states now use. It's been used for decades in many places, and it does help people correct errors on election day and exercise their constitutional right to vote. We obviously, this whole issue that we're talking about, making the reforms that were enacted this year on a temporary basis a permanent, I think, is also an important piece. And there are others. So that those are the highlights.
Senator Finegold, I may give you the last word here. Pam is obviously pushing for a number of major changes. Does the legislature have an appetite to take up more voter reform measures? Do you think there's more that needs to be looked at, things like allowing same-day voter registration?
Absolutely. I'm a huge supporter of same-day registration. New Hampshire has it. We should too. This is 2020. We have the technology to do it. What we've done with vote by mail is we've got more people to participate. And our goal should always have even more people participate, because when more people participate, democracy wins. And whether you're a Democrat or Republican, the higher participation, the better. And that's only good for our towns and cities, and for our state and for our country. So we are always open to it. We started in 2014 with allowing people to register online. So there are things that we at least started there. And we just need to continue some of that stuff that we've started, and we've made a lot of milestones this year. So I look forward to working with Common Cause and some of the other important groups to try to continue to push forward these reforms.
And you can read lots more about voting and about the election at commonwealthmagazine.org. Pam Wilmot of Common Cause and State Senator Barry Finegold, thank you so much for joining me on the Codcast.
Thanks, Shira.